Welcome back, everyone. We have made it to the final video lesson, at least in this series. It's been really fun putting these together, and I hope they have been informative, regardless of your level of experience with the neurodiversity movement. Boycott to Siri was a social media campaign that surrounded the book To Siri with Love, written by Judith Newman. I was personally a bit confused about what the campaign meant from its name alone when I first heard it. Was it a boycott to the Siri feature on Apple devices or something else entirely? Turns out it was related to a book. Newman is a mother of an autistic person named Gus. The contents of this book included very intimate details about Gus, who was a teenager at the time she wrote it. She questioned whether Gus had an inner life at all, and talked about how she was contemplating sterilization and guardianship. She also talked about private things he did that I think a lot of teenagers do, but because he's autistic, that privacy was not as easily respected. Autistic people have their meltdowns filmed in the name of awareness, and because of our disability, it's assumed that we don't want certain things. So people in charge of us of our lives will make decisions for us. It's why self-determination is so important and a key component to the greater disability rights movement. Many autistic people were upset about this book and took to social media with the hashtag #BoycottToSiri. Amethyst Shaber, a well-known advocate in autistic spaces at the time, started the campaign. Newman learned of this campaign and tried to apologize to people and make amends, but she ended up making things worse. She acted very stubborn towards people who were trying to educate her, and I guess the criticism wasn't respectful enough in her eyes. A lot of what she did was gaslighting people who had interpretations of what she wrote about, trying to tell them that it wasn't what it looked like. Now, I'm not sure she really thought talking about Gus like he doesn't have a mind was a joke or not, like she claimed it was, but she seemed unwilling to accept the ramifications of her words. She also called Amethyst a manic pixie dream girl in the book, which she thought was a compliment, but if she had done an iota of extra research, she would have known it was not. Amethyst told her such, but she didn't seem to like the way they told her. I don't know. I don't think her apologies were very genuine. It sounds like she should have done more revision before publishing the book. Thankfully, it seems like she has gone back on her decision to sterilize Gus and get a guardianship, at least for now. But the fact that she published her contemplation of it in print like this, like it was a normal thing to ponder, is quite concerning. A few years after the incident, she wrote a review of a book Amy Lutz wrote about living with severe autism called We Walk, referring to the critics of her 2017 book as the actually autistic murder hornets. I think it's obvious that Newman continues to hold a grudge against her critics based on this. Celebrities aren't really known for being allies to the disability rights movement, and that includes neurodiversity. This one particular instance is pretty intriguing to me. William Shatner, who is best known for his role as Captain James Kirk in the original Star Trek series, tweeted about lighting it up blue and changed his profile picture to a puzzle piece. Ari Naiman, among other people, challenged this and asked him to reconsider. Instead of listening to the people he was supposedly going to bat for, he doubled down on his support and took it as an attack on his character. Shatner is known for being very self centered, thinking he is always right about everything. This is evident from how he talks about his castmates from Star Trek and how they talk about him, as well as how he argues with people on Twitter about other topics. He likes to quote retweet people who criticize them and then block them. He did it with me, actually, and I ended up getting a lot of harassment from his supporters. He claims to be fair, as he does it with everyone, but it's still really inconsiderate regardless. Shatner repeats the same talking points over and over, and it really shows his ableist hand. Whether it's that, and these aren't direct quotes but are paraphrased, you guys want to stop all research and pocket money for yourselves, or what about more severely autistic people? Or even, ABA is good because you can't just expect people to accommodate you your whole life and let you act like a savage. So he's quite hostile, to put it lightly. He accuses ASAN of only spending donation money on salaries, and he does this by deliberately using a tax form from a year where they had a revenue slide. He even made a gif of his typical rebuttals to ending his support of Autism Speaks. Now, he hasn't done this in a while, though it's quite perplexing to me how a big celebrity like him finds time to argue with people on Twitter like this. It's more funny than anything, though it says a lot about Shatner's character and how celebrities tend to respond to criticism of what causes they choose to support in general. I was never a Star Trek guy, definitely more Star Wars, so it makes no difference to me at all. CardGate refers to an incident related to behavior analysts making their own Cards Against Humanity deck in 2017, which already sounds like a disaster to me. The deck makes light of seriously harmful practices done within ABA, like force feeding and even electric shock. It was shared by BCVA content creator Behavior Babe. It was assumed she was one of the people behind the card deck, but it turns out she was not. It was never discovered who exactly made it, but it was a group of behavior analysts. It's pretty disgusting that they did this, and it really shows what kind of stuff is often done in ABA in the name of evidence-based practice. There's really no hope for this field since they like to joke about this kind of stuff, and I really mean it when I say there's no hope. The idea of ABA reform is becoming more popular these days, and I will die on this hill when I say that is a terrible idea. People already like to say ABA is not as bad as it used to be. These reform efforts will only lend further credence to that argument. While I appreciate that more nuanced conversations are happening around ABA and how getting rid of it won't solve other bigger issues within society, credit to Fidgets and Fries and not functioning autism for that, I still stand firm in my belief that ABA is rotten to its core. I understand why some may want to make individual ABA cases the least harmful if someone is stuck there for one reason or another, but trying to fix the practice itself will not work. It'll just lead to smaller, nicer looking ABA practices that are just as harmful, much like the institutional cycle where smaller institutions are built and then more harm inevitably happens. Organizing against ABA and building better services should be done instead. International Day of Protest Against the ABA was started by Autistics United Canada and is observed every year on August 31st. This date was chosen because it's the anniversary of the day CardGate happened. It's a day where self advocates share the problems they have with ABA. The first day of protest was in 2018. It once again shows what nothing about us without us means. Hold on. In early 2019, an organization called National Council on Severe Autism was founded. It was started by Jill Escher and Allison Singer, who I've already talked about in previous videos. She's the mother from Autism Every Day who talked about wanting to drive her daughter Jody off of the Washington Bridge. Escher was already known for leading the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of Autism Society of America, which you can't join without signing an agreement that autism is an epidemic. So, yeah. NCSA is very reactionary and is a hostile response to the growing neurodiversity movement. Many of their members and supporters are people who feel wronged by the movement in some way. They are very similar to Voice of Reason, a parent led organization that advocates for the institutionalization of people who are the most severely disabled, quote unquote. They do this advocacy under the guise of advocating for choice, when they really mean the choice of parents who want to institutionalize their offspring. NCSA engages in a lot of provocation of neurodiversity advocates, and it does so intentionally. They use a lot of the rhetoric Autism Speaks used to use, which I think is also intentional. It's not like they're irrelevant either, because several of their members are quite influential in the trajectory of autism policy. Jill Escher has even gone so far as to call the neurodiversity movement, quote, the bloodthirsty autism Taliban. Several of their members are former Autism Speaks executives besides Singer, and at least one of their board members is currently employed there. There are autistic people involved with their organization, though they deliberately platform autistic people who are anti neurodiversity in their work. Autism Speaks does this too, though I don't think it's as purposeful. NCSA's basic premise is to be against anything the neurodiversity movement is for and for anything the neurodiversity movement is against. Despite most of their leadership being people who are liberal and vote Democrat, some of the people they platform are openly fascist, such as Tom Clements, a white nationalist, and Jonathan Mitchell, an incel. There's really no bridge too far for what they'll do to paint a narrative that discredits the neurodiversity movement. And they do it all with the idea of helping people with severe autism, quote unquote. While the neurodiversity movement has indeed struggled with properly centering the voices of autistic people who are non-speaking and or have an intellectual disability, it's not in the way that NCSA and its supporters accuse it of. As bad as Autism Speaks is, and even though there is some collaborations with members of AS in this organization, NCSA is definitely worse. NCSA is built on hate from top to bottom. Despite the existence of groups like NCSA, there have been recent organizations that are doing work to give non speakers the mic. One such organization is Communication First, founded in 2019. Their director is Tana Szymanski. Many people in their leadership and board are people with communication related disabilities, which of course includes autistic people who use AAC. Not all of them are autistic, they are a cross disability organization, which is good. They have done some really great work so far, and I'm excited to see what they do next. They focus a lot on policy, much like ASAN, but they also made a 5 minute short called Listen, and it's gorgeous. I'll talk a little more about Listen later. They also helped produce a film called This Is Not About Me, which focuses on one person in particular, Jordan Zimmerman, and how getting access to an AAC device and presuming competence completely changed her life. It's really good, go rent it. Beforehand, there was Deej, which I have not seen, that similarly focuses on Deej Savarisi, whose life changed for the better after being taught to communicate via AAC. They also recently started a project called AAC Counts, being coordinated by Alyssa Hillary Zisk, who is a part time AAC user. It's looking at data related to AAC users in California and what areas of improvement there are for meeting their needs. Along with communication first, there are a number of efforts in getting the voices of non-speakers heard. Certainly greater efforts than there was before. This includes organizations like the International Association for Spelling as Communication (IASC), the Zaquande Foundation, and the Facebook group Ask Me I'm an AAC User. IASC is led by professionals, though has an advisory board of AAC users. The Quande Foundation was started by an AAC user, and Ask Me I'm an AAC User is moderated by AAC users. I do think it's important to have AAC users not just in advisory roles, but as the leaders themselves. I like that about Zaquande and Ask Me. It seems like IS does plenty of work in platforming the people they're claiming to serve, don't get me wrong. I just think it'd be ideal if the director was someone who used AAC. Communication First also has co-leadership, and one of their directors is Bob Williams, who solely communicates through AAC. The Zaquande was started in South Africa, and not only does work surrounding access to communication devices in Africa, but also autistic self-advocacy in Africa in general. It's good to see some influence of the neurodiversity movement in the global South. Hopefully, this is only the beginning. Ask Me I'm an AAC User is a great group, which is rare to find among Facebook groups. They have a rule where whenever someone makes a post, only AAC users are allowed to respond within the first 24 hours of posting, which I think is a great setup that assures that AAC users get time to talk without being spoken over. It's not always followed, unfortunately, but the admins and moderators are really good at holding others accountable. Non speakers have been left out for far too long, and I'm happy to see that starting to change. I think there's still a lot of work to be done, even among these spaces, to ensure that they're given meaningful leadership and agency, but this is quite encouraging. You know who else has been largely left out in the neurodiversity movement? Autistic people of color. Now, that isn't to say this movement was built entirely by white people or that autistic BIPOC haven't made significant contributions to it. In fact, I'd argue that many have made some of the most significant contributions to the neurodiversity movement. The problem is that there hasn't been enough centering of them as there has been of white autistic people. So, one thing a particular group of black and brown autistic people did in the mid 2010s was put together an anthology of writings by autistic people of color called All the Weight of Our Dreams on Living Racialized Autism. It was edited by Lydia Brown, Marinike Giwa Onaiwu, and E. Ashkenazi. It is the first race specific anthology published about autism, at least one that is published by autistic people. Last year, it was unpublished, so you cannot purchase it right now unless you're getting it used. I did not purchase it before publication was pulled, unfortunately. They did this over some concerns over whether some of the people featured were actually people of color, as well as some content that came off as insensitive. It seems like it was a great book, regardless, and I look forward to the second edition's release. Continuing on our discussion on autism and race, here's a project called the Fund for Community Reparations for Autistic People of Color's Interdependence, Survival, and Empowerment. It's often just called the Autistic People of Color Fund. It's an organization that started in 2018 via a grant from the American Association of People with Disabilities. It's also connected to AWN. A portion of the royalties made from All the Weight of Our Dreams all went towards this project. They raise money so that they can provide grants to autistic people of color. It used to be autistic people of color and their family members, but they later decided it was better to just have autistic people apply. Their leadership is entirely people of color. They're all people who have extensive experience in disability advocacy. It was founded by Lydia Brown. I think it's a great project and I hope it continues to grow. Autistic characters exist in entertainment. This isn't necessarily new, in fact, it started quite a while ago, but there has been an increase of this in the past decade. Most of them, at least in popular media, have been portrayed by non-autistic actors. They also tend to lead towards the white male savant stereotype, and I personally don't care for it. Atypical casts a non-autistic actor as the lead character who is autistic, and what makes it really feel like a gut punch is that there was an autistic actor up for the role, but the producer decided to go with a non-autistic one. Later seasons introduced autistic characters who were in fact played by autistic actors, but it kept the neurotypical lead actor, so I don't think it does much to rectify that. The Good Doctor does a similar thing with its lead character being played by Freddie Highmore. They have supporting autistic characters played by autistic actors, Alex Plank being one of them, but again, I don't think that really fixes the problem. Can non-autistic people play autistic characters? They can, sure, but it really falls flat 9 times out of 10 in my opinion, because autism isn't something you can pretend to be. A profession such as a doctor is something you can put on and take off. Disability is not that. It also plays into the assumption that autistic people can't act when that clearly isn't true, even by these show standards. I did acting in theater for several years, and I can guarantee you that if I was in a play with a non-autistic actor who was playing an autistic character, I would feel awful. It would feel incredibly objectifying to me, and I'd feel like I don't belong there. Maybe that's how these actors who played supporting characters felt, but I know I personally wouldn't even bother in the first place. Love on the Spectrum is a reality show that stars autistic people, which I guess is nice. But from what I've heard, the contestants are encouraged to act neurotypical, even though all of them are autistic. There's a guy who says some very misogynistic things that are just kind of laughed off because he's autistic. I haven't heard much about the second season, but the whole concept seems exploitative to me. Music is the most infamous of these, being directed by pop artist Sia. The main character, named Music, is played by Maddie Ziegler and is non-speaking. Ziegler relied heavily on offensive stereotypes related to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, per Sia's direction, and the movie portrays prone restraint, which can be fatal, as an act of love. Sia said she would remove the scenes from the movie, but never did. People were furious about how this movie looked on social media, and when calling Sia in for accountability, she repeatedly doubled down, and her fans harassed people, which she never did anything to rectify. It, it's come out since then by a secondary source, that being Kathy Griffin of all people, that the aftermath of her movie made her depressed and suicidal, and that Sia herself is autistic. Assuming all of that is true, it does not absolve Sia of her actions one bit. Autistic people are fully capable of harming other autistic people, especially those who are able to communicate by speaking in order to be understood, and those who do not have intellectual disability. One good thing came from this, though, and that was Communication First Listen. Please go watch it instead. With that said, there are a few examples of good representation of autistic people in the media. And guess what? It doesn't necessarily have to be produced by autistic people for this to be the case. Everything's Gonna Be Okay was produced by Josh Thomas, who is autistic, and I really like it personally. The lead character is played by an autistic actress, and any other autistic character in the show is as well. The show has a very modest feel to it, not playing anything up too dramatically, and I think that lends well to how it characterizes autistic people. It feels very natural. It was unfortunately discontinued after two seasons, but what's there is really good. It's also a very queer show. Loop and Float are both Pixar shorts. Float is more metaphorical in how it demonstrates autism and suggests that we should celebrate people's differences rather than make them act more normal. Loop's main character, Renee, is autistic. She's also black and non speaking. The director, Erica Milsom, actually reached out to autistic people, ASEN to be specific, in the creation of this short. She also cast Madison Bandy, who is black, autistic, and non speaking. What results is something that feels authentic and something that encourages viewers to see autistic people as whole people and not as burdens. Renee isn't portrayed as overly needy, and the onus is put on her rowing partner, Marcus, to learn about Renee's needs and that the way she communicates and moves is perfectly valid. Really, the only issues I have with it are that it's only a short, what when I would love more, and I do wish they had Renee use a more robust AAC device. Other than that, Loop is excellent and well worth a watch if you have a Disney Plus subscription. Float is pretty good too, but Loop is better in my opinion. Okay, so here are some updates on the Stop the Shock campaign. The FDA issued its final ban on the devices at JRC in early 2020. It was supposedly going to be a huge victory for those who have labored tirelessly for years to end the torture these devices cause. Unfortunately, that is not how things are playing out at this moment. The JRC was able to delay the ban using COVID as an excuse, and then last year the DC Circuit Court overturned the FDA's ban. The JRC also sued the FDA. The DC court used the reasoning that you can't ban the specific use of a device unless you ban the device entirely. I don't think this is necessarily true, though I think any excuse the people who are letting the JRC continue to use these devices are stretching to justify it, including the JRC themselves. So now what? Well, there are some recent developments that could be good news. Andre's Law was introduced in the state of New York, which would prevent the state of New York from sending any additional residents to the JRC. That's where most of the residents were sent there from. So it would be a major development in curbing enrollment at JRC. Another positive development is that there is a bill in Congress right now, the FDA Amendments Act in the House and the FDA SLA in the Senate. One provision of this bill would be to ban the use of electric shock devices as a method of behavioral control. The House's version of this bill includes it already, that the Senate's does not. The JRC is lobbying to remove the ban. So if there's anything you want to take action on related to the neurodiversity movement, then contacting your senators about this would be a good thing to do. Now we're caught up to the present. There are several things I could have included. These lessons aren't completely all encompassing, but I do think it covers the main topics related to this movement. So all there is left to talk about, aside from the things I may have missed, is where this movement is going. Disability justice is a framework that has existed for a while, but is starting to slowly catch on within self advocacy spaces, including neurodiversity. It emphasizes anti capitalism, police and prison abolition, and centering the most impacted, among other things. When they say the most impacted, they mean people who are the most marginalized, as they are the most familiar with oppressive systems. So people who are not only disabled, but a person of color, queer, and low income, for example. There are 10 principles of disability justice altogether. Groups like Sins Invalid, which I did undergraduate research on, have been doing this work for a while. It goes beyond disability rights as it focuses on improving material conditions instead of writing the best laws and electing the best people. People have been slow to adopt this framework for a number of reasons, but I do think it's the right thing to do. It's honestly some of the best intersectional activism out there because it really considers everything at every level. Now, I personally think disability rights is still a valid framework, and I don't think the two can't coexist, But I also think disability justice considers things more holistically than disability rights often does. We're seeing more cross disability organizing as well as more intersectional work, which is great. I've talked about the Medicaid cuts protests, but disability organizations are also collaborating more, generally speaking, and this includes organizations related to neurodivergence. There was collaboration between various nonprofits in holding the CDC accountable earlier this year, and ASAM was part of that. We're also seeing plenty of collaboration between them with regards to reproductive justice in wake of recent events. I really hope these efforts bear fruit over time. So, what's new and what's not so new? What's new is that the internet has evolved, and with that, the movement has also evolved. It has more reach than ever. Neurodiversity affirming content is pretty easy to come by on social media. There's also more in person organizing. However, a lot of it is the same as it was 30 years ago. There is the same power struggle between self advocates and parents and professionals. Though it's less common than it used to be, the tragedy and pro cure rhetoric is still present. At the very least, many people still think autism should be cured. Long-standing issues like aspie supremacy and racism are very much still present within autistic spaces. Despite the progress that has been made, there's much to still be made. So how do we do that? I can't say for sure, but I do think coalition building with not just other disability sub-movements, but other justice movements could certainly go a long way. I think it's important that in pursuit of larger reach, to remember core principles and not to compromise them. That may make it more difficult, but it's not impossible. Let's briefly discuss something I've seen happen. As is the case for other movements, as they become more well known, the more likely it becomes that aesthetics and platitudes are adopted without a true understanding of what they actually mean. Many neurotypical run organizations, for example, will use the infinity symbol and might even try to sell merchandise with it, but won't truly back that up with their actions. There are also people, as I discussed in previous parts, who say nothing about us without us, but not in a way that the originators of the phrase meant. You'll see companies misuse terms like neurodiverse, which I'm not a fan of anyway, but at least use it right if you're going to use it at all. I imagine this will only continue to happen. What matters is that people who know the truth are out there. What do I think needs to be done differently? There are several things I think need to be done differently. Some of them are problems that have existed for years, others are more recent developments that make me think the old way of doing it was better. So, this is what I think, and keep in mind, what I say shouldn't be taken as gospel, and I am coming at this largely as a historian. You'll see two coins here to illustrate my 2 cents. We need to fight Aspie supremacy at all costs. It's dangerous, and it devalues people who are among the most marginalized in our population. Said people tend to have the most profound things to say. We also really need to address racism within our spaces. Things will only get worse if we don't. Another thing we need to do is focus on collective organizing and stick to our principles. It needs to be prioritized over brand building and self interest. When people focus on those things, they often end up betraying their own movement and compromising messages in order to appeal to certain audiences. Some people suggest that you don't support nonprofits at all and just individuals, which I think is a horrible take. That isn't to say there aren't problems with how nonprofits function, but many of them do serve an important role in the advancement of our movement, and it feels disingenuous to suggest otherwise. There's been an increase in social media influencers who affiliate themselves with the neurodiversity movement, and they tend to have the largest reach, at least on social media. There are also lots of autistic people on TikTok trying to spread the messages of neurodiversity, but I feel like they're missing a lot of the nuance, and some of it is on them, but some of it is also related to how these social media platforms are built and what the algorithm prefers. I see many comments and posts that I generally agree with the argument they're making, but they make it in a way that ignores so much nuance, or it makes some comparisons that feel like a huge stretch. This is emblematic of the internet in general, and it was a thing in the past too. It's so important to learn your history, not just of the neurodiversity movement, but the history of autism and other disabilities as well. and other disability submovements. There is so much we can learn from them, and there are many parallels. They laid the groundwork that made this movement possible in the first place. I think it'll also help people understand why some disability communities prefer person first language, for example. This brings me to my last point. Nuance is vital. I feel like a lot of people in autistic spaces tend to miss the nuance behind things, and when someone actually presents it to them, they accuse said person of supporting something that they don't. Two things can both be true. Issues don't exist in a vacuum. Sometimes these are rookie mistakes, other times it's because someone's experience with said issues is limited to the internet. Online advocacy is perfectly valid, but if all you engage in is a few social media accounts that feed you bite sized information, there is so much you're going to miss. Nuanced information actually takes time to engage in, and it's well worth it once you do. With that, this series is complete. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you watched the whole way through. But I'm also thankful even if you only watched one video. Not counting this video, the total amount of viewing time for this series is about 4.5 hours. The neurodiversity movement is still young and has time to grow and evolve beyond what it already has. I hope as it does that people will remember its roots. With that, I bid you farewell.